Good morning, everybody. Thank you all. We are now at 11:30. We've got some more folks coming in the room. Thank you all very much for joining us for the virtual leadership meeting. As you all may know, we have been hosting these now certainly all through the last year and a half, but they stretch back even further to probably closer to 3 years, where we're hosting meetings for those involved in the chamber with elected officials, so that we can get to know them a little bit better. Just so that everybody's aware, I think if you're probably on the call, my guess is you know this already, but we do this as a path of letting everybody get to know each other a little bit better, so that we can know Representative Wade a good bit better. He is still fairly new to our delegation, and glad to have you. And Will, thank you very much for being on. I'm going to cover just a few ground rules and sponsors, and then we will get started. So first of all, I want to continue to thank Renaissance Bank and Brandywine Printing. They're both longtime supporters of the chamber in general, but particularly this initiative, and really want to thank them for their continued leadership to help make this happen. A few ground rules, if you would, everybody, please keep your mics off. Jesse Martin on our team is sort of the producer of this, and she's going to keep an eye on that. But if you would keep yourselves muted. If you have a question or something that you'd like to share, if you will use the raise your hand feature, I think by now we probably all know how to do that. And then Jesse will unmute you and bring you into the call. You can also certainly put something in the chat feature if you'd prefer to do that. That's perfectly fine as well. And then we are doing, we've always, well, for a long time, we have done polling questions on the virtual leadership meetings, but this year, this month, we're starting to use a different feature called Poll EV, Poll Everywhere. And so I would just ask you, go ahead now and scan the QR code into your phone, and you can open up Poll EV. If you would prefer to do it via text, that's fine too. You can text James McCoy 350 and text that to number 22333. So the text message you are sending is James McCoy 350. The number you are sending it to is 22333, and Poll EV will populate via text. So I happen to prefer to use the QR code and use it that version that way, but please go ahead and do that now, and that will lead us into the first poll question after we have a chance to engage a bit with Representative Wade. So I'm going to leave that up for just another second or two to give everybody a chance to scan the QR code or text the code James McCoy 350 to that number. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all again. Representative Wade, thank you. We are so glad to have you. And I know certainly coming into the this has been a strange year to start a gig, and but you've done an outstanding job, and we are so glad to have you. I know certainly I've had the privilege of knowing you for a long time, and going back to GMRC days and that sort of thing. And of course, you've been a phenomenal public servant for a very, well, I guess probably your whole life, but if you would take a minute or two and introduce yourself to everybody, and then we'll jump back to the first poll question and get started. So
sure. So thanks for having me, first of all, and because we're on technology, making sure we got a good thumbs up on sound, everybody good. I am a person that believes in service, and that was instilled in me by my parents, both educators, and I think for me, it was best by being kind of the young maverick who thought he knew more than he actually did, who ran for school board in Dawson County as a 25-year-old and began my service as a 26-year-old. and served on that board for almost 16 years. It was about 3 months shy when I had to resign to run to fill this seat back last March, and or the March, yeah. Time flies, doesn't it? It's been a crazy year, and I guess the week I qualified to run for state house, the week after that, March 13th, the world changed with this pandemic, and it's been kind of a interesting period of time to try to be of service when we're in a period of disruption, is what I prefer to call it. I know some folks who call it crisis and chaos, and I think we always are in the business world, and even in our personal lives. We're just in a period of disruption, and so that for me is something that's encouraging, and it's exciting. It's challenging. I know that this chamber has tried to help folks of all size businesses to be able to navigate those things, and it kind of reminds me. Um, my first experiences of disruption came pretty early on as a school board member in Dawson County. And some of the folks on the call may remember back around 2005 when our school board and many systems around the state were having to make decisions about facilities and infrastructure that was constructed in the 50s and 60s. And we had I was a product of the system. K-12 actually started kindergarten when it was a one campus entire system, so we had kindergartners on the same campus as seniors. And I was a chairman of a board as a young man, having to go through the process of listening to concerns for those that wanted to tear down the old original high school, to rebuild, for basically for efficiency and safety reasons, and from a cost. It was very expensive to run that school, and you know, combating nostalgia. Right, I played basketball in that gymnasium. You know, my dad was a teacher in that building. I mean, I literally have a brick from my dad's old classroom. So it was a tough disruption to our community, but the net effect of it taught me that if you have a cool head and you just listen to folks and sincerely let them speak their concerns, and then you give them the data as to, okay, if you really want us to keep this facility, this is what it's going to cost the taxpayers continually. And we were fortunate back then that we had a very uh, you know insightful board that had put a SPLOST referendum out there. The public approved it, and that was a completely different way of funding infrastructure. And I believe it's probably what has caused Dawson County schools to have some of the most premier facilities, as well as the most premier educational outcomes and experiences for students today. So I was really glad to be a part of that. It was tough. I got cussed out at the grocery store, but I listened and I took it. And to me, it taught me people just want to be heard. And I think if you look as a business person and as a chamber, that's basically what has happened over the last 15 to 18 months. People just want to be heard. So I'm enjoying that in my role. Some days I don't have any problem sleeping when I finally lay down at night, because every day is completely filled with very passionate conversations, and I love it. So
Well,
that's a little
thank you.
bit about me.
That's excellent. That is fantastic. Thank you. And for the record, I think you're still a young maverick. So
I appreciate
it. So,
Well, I don't mind. I'm 43 years young, and I'm getting younger every day. I've got a 7-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son, and I can assure you that they are keeping me young. So
I'm sure. I have no doubt about that. Okay, well, thank you. Let's Jesse, if you would bring up the screen just one more time. I know we've had a few more people join us to show the QR code or the text. For those of you just joining us, we're going to do a few poll questions for everybody on the call. Certainly you can take your phone and scan in the QR code, and it will bring up a polling application, or you can send the text to number 22333. The text content should say James McCoy 350, and that should bring up the poll. So if you have not done so already, go ahead and do that, and then we'll go ahead and start then with the very first question, and that is, in the next legislative session, what issues do you hope the legislature will address as a priority? And so we've got a handful of people that responded, but as you respond, these numbers will change and alter a little bit. So we'll give folks just
Sure.
another
Well,
moment.
while they're doing that, I'll tell you a little bit about just kind of my role currently in the House. I was selected to serve on the Education Committee, and I'm a vice chairman or chairman, sorry, of one of our subcommittees. And so, education, obviously, being a person on the school board, and I get trained daily because my wife is a career educator. She's been in education longer than I've been involved. She's in her 21st year in education, and she's an assistant principal at the middle school in Lumpkin County now. And I can assure you that I'm spending a lot of time discussing education and what can we do to streamline decision making back down, to the local level. Had some good bills this year. We're going to have a lot more next year, I think. Obviously, everybody's asking me, is the governor going to give, the teacher pay raises? I think it's going to be difficult for him not to, given the current budget situation. We're doing very well. Thankful to the decision of the governor as well as the state legislature and others, private businesses finding ways to persevere and reopen. And so for me, that is going to be probably one of the areas that I'm focused on the most because I'm directly involved in that committee process. Securing elections, obviously, there's still so many questions. And I know that the national media wants to pit this against, either the big lie versus the reality of where we are today. And it's really not that. I think for me, I look at it from my experience in business and in banking. I'm a 23-year community banker, and I'm very accustomed, like many folks on this call, of their businesses having to deal with audits. And one of the components that I'm going to be involved with is taking my current piece of legislation that I authored, House Bill 406, which was an election audit bill that I believe I'm going to have an opportunity to bring that back up in January. And it's just going to put in place the process for consistent audits to ensure that what we as voters expect happens gets inspected in a uniform manner. With a third party that's not there for any partisan reasons, just to, my dad was a former math teacher, just check the boxes, right? And make sure that what we believe is supposed to happen happened, and not be concerned about what is the tabulation equal, just to be able to report that what was tabulated was accurate. So hopefully that we'll be able to do that. Reducing congestion and transportation, I see, has made the list. I'm kind of surprised it's not a little higher. I know I remember being able to go to the legislative session this year during the COVID environment, and former Representative Tanner was very involved with transportation issues, but he basically told me as a new legislator that he said the toughest job is driving down to Atlanta each and every day. And that really wasn't the toughest part of my commute. It was actually fine. It was the quickest I'd ever been to Atlanta, probably in the last decade. But that's quickly changed now that we've opened back up. And, I know that DOT is trying to help, especially in North Forsyth, with the new exit. I guess it's going to be exit 18 there at 369. And I'm hopeful that that's going to help alleviate that. I think the additional lanes that Forsyth County imposed a tax on themselves to address it. I personally am a big fan of consumption taxes versus taxing productivity. So I think that shows that the Forsyth community was willing to pay for the infrastructure needs. And I predict that you'll see Dawson County. I don't want to get out in front of a local leader, but I believe that they would be well poised to consider a transportation bill to help expand at least the 400 corridor through Dawson County. And with the hospital going to be in Lumpkin County, I really feel blessed to be a legislator that gets to represent three of the best communities in the state. And I'm not just saying that because, I believe it. I really think other people outside of our community believe that and want to be here. Dawson County Superintendent sent me a text earlier this week about the number of new students in the system. I'm getting the same information from my wife and the superintendent as well in Lumpkin County that their student populations are growing. Everybody knows about the school system in Forsyth County growing. So transportation and congestion issues aren't going to go away. But what can we do to ensure that local authorities are, given the tools to pay for ways to fix it? I hope we can figure out ways to streamline that and have a heightened sense of urgency to address it. And I don't think we're done with the change of the work environment where, like, I'm at home right now and I probably spend 70% of my time working from home currently right now in my legislative capacity, because I'm able to utilize technology like this to meet with either constituents or groups, or just do the legislative business and communicate with other legislators via technology. So that takes me off the road. So I don't know what the net effect of that's going to be, but obviously people are still moving into our region, into this part of the country. So we're going to have to continue to address it. So that was a lot
Excellent.
to cover, but
No, that's great. That's that is fantastic. And thank you. And for the purposes of those who are on the call, we, um, there has always been a positive and cooperative relationship among the chambers along the 400 corridor, particularly North Fulton and Forsyth County and Dawson. But as we're all looking at the express lanes and honestly transit options expanding with it not just being about rail or a bus, that there's other options to consider in that as well. That we're now this fall, we're going to be hosting a series of conversations among our chambers to get business folks really excited and engaged in the conversation around corridor transportation, and hopefully helping to lead that. So, but you're right. I mean, I think leadership along the corridor is really strong, and coordinating that will also help a great deal. So, Jesse, thank you for putting that up there. Let's I think in your introduction, you certainly gave a great background of who you are and your background. But what? So you've been on the school board, and we're on the school board for a number of years, and I think anybody who knows anything about serving on a school board knows that's a thankless task. But you did a great job with that. So what compelled you to say,
sure.
I need to run for State House?
I'm going to say this in two ways. Partly Dawson County pride, if I'm being honest. I think one of the best working legislators that this state has seen was my predecessor, Kevin Tanner. Kevin is not a person that seeks the limelight. And I get emotional about him because my dad was his teacher. I lost my dad this year, and I've got these memories of my dad highlighting Kevin as a student when I was coming up in elementary and middle school. And so Kevin was a guy that I just looked up to and just thought, that's the way I want to lead if I ever have an opportunity to lead. And I felt like trying to make sure that we continue to make sure the ball didn't get dropped for my district, that I felt like, you know what, I'm not going to be as good as Kevin, but I'm going to bust my tail. And that's the goal. He set the standard. And I felt like I was the best candidate to go out there and do that and make sure the ball didn't get dropped. And so he's a Dawson County native. I think he's 7 generations. I'm now here building, my family's 3rd generation in the community. And I want to make sure that we continue to have good leadership. That's not to take away from anybody in Lumpkin County. My family, my wife's family is all from Lumpkin, or at least a good part of it. And I know Lumpkin County wants to have representation there. And I feel like I was also a person that had worked in that community, a product of UNG. Been in church my faith background. We've been going to church over 30 years in Lumpkin County. So I felt like I was a person that just said, you know what, I am a part of this district. This is who I am. and I don't ever see myself leaving this district. I love this part of the state, and I want to raise my family here. And I hope my kids have kids one day, and I get to be a granddad, and we can talk about the fourth generation. So for me, that was kind of the okay. I'm going to look at doing this, but then also I felt like, I've been a community banker all throughout North Georgia, primarily Dawson, Forsyth, and Lumpkin County. So that was like, okay, same district. I know the business community here. I know the agriculture community here. And I guess lastly, it was about 15 years ahead of what I thought was going to be possible. So this was something that I had envisioned. I would like to do this at some point down the road once I retire from banking. My assumption was, Kevin would continue in that role, and honestly, in my personal opinion, could have been a future Speaker of the House, just because he's that caliber of a leader, and well thought of on both sides of the aisle down in Atlanta. But he made a choice to choose a different path, and that changed the trajectory for so many people. And so I just happened to benefit from his decision to make a career change, and it definitely sped up. It wasn't January 1st of 2020. It was not something that I thought I was going to be doing. So it's really interesting how quickly things can change and shift, just because of one domino effect. So, but I feel like I was supposed to do it, and I'm glad to do it. I don't plan on doing it forever. I'm going to do it as long as I can be effective.
Well, that's excellent, and of course, Forsyth County got to benefit from that change of trajectory too.
That is very true. I will say, I'm proud. I'm proud that Forsyth County is benefiting from a good Dawson County guy.
Yeah.
So, good job for Forsyth.
Well, and of course, he is no one is surprised at the phenomenal job he is doing as our county manager, and and of course, it did not take long at all for him to get in that seat and get things really rolling. He's done a phenomenal job. So you're exactly right. So particularly coming into the legislature this past year, and I'm sure there's been a lot of eye-opening experiences given this past year. But what, from your standpoint, particularly coming in new, what are the most important lessons you've learned, particularly? Nothing is ever what it seems. And I imagine the legislature is no different. So what are the most important lessons you've learned as you have come into this, and what are some of the key takeaways from this past year for you?
It reminds me of a former coach. And I'm glad that I had the experience of being a former athlete. I wasn't the best athlete on our team. But we had a really good basketball team when I was coming up in the mid 90s, and none of us were phenomenal individual players, but we were a phenomenal team, and we defeated teams that were, had two or three college bound players, dynamic, individual players, but we had been playing basketball together since we were young. And our coach told us a lesson that I have carried and probably used more in this role than I've ever used it. And that is, don't get too high on the highs, don't get too low on the lows. And this legislative session, there was like a fever pitch about several issues. And there was people that were just wanting action and wanting, we need to fix this now. And I was one of them. I wanted to, I have a heightened sense of urgency. I am an impatient person. Todd Jones and I have become, I think, good friends. And I've known Lauren longer, and Lauren and I have become friends, and thankful for the delegation. But Todd, I think, even sensed, my frustration and came to me. He said, "Will, this is slower than business. We have to get consensus, and we've got to build a team." And that's when it was like, okay, I can do that. And we're not always going to agree exactly on the play, right? But when the play is called, I feel like it's important for me to play my role and execute with efficiency, diligence, and gusto, right? Give it all I've got, read the bills, work through the issues, return the phone calls of the frustrated people, um, and provide them that calmness and say, look, I know you're mad, or I know you don't like this. Let's figure out a way to fix it. Let's take our time. Let's take a deep breath and not get too high on the highs and too low on the lows. And for me, that has been, I guess, the resounding kind of echo in my mind as to how I can address things. The legislative session is its own animal. It wow, it can be very frustrating for me, especially coming from business where there's a process. I've been a commercial lender, so you have an applicant, you have a customer, there's a need, you figure out it, you put it together, you get a closing, there's some finality to it, right? And then people go run their business. The legislative process is a whole lot of 2 steps forward, 2 or 3 steps back. Oh my gosh, we got to go over here now. We just set that entire bill down for the week and we're now 100% focused on this. That was very difficult for me to adjust to immediately, but being engaged in the process, it taught me that, hey, it's okay. That's how we have to address it. Could we do better? Yes, I think we could. My favorite leadership book is Team of Rivals. And, you know, my church, and I'm a person of faith, and I don't try to push my faith on anybody else, but I can't hide it. And we've been able to celebrate our 150th year as a church this year. So we were founded in 1871. And I kind of thought through what was the world like in 1871 when that church was founded. And it took me back to that book and post Civil War and what prior to the assassination of President Lincoln, what did he do to try to unite in some of the most disrupting periods of our history? And that was to what? Bring along those folks that were the loudest voices of opposition together to try to find some type of common good and consensus. Now, do I think we're there right now from our partisan politics? No, we're not. Everybody knows that. But I think that there is a growing number of individuals that are in service right now that want to find the places that we can do that, like infrastructure, for example, and on education. To me, those are, I mean, roads and kids aren't partisan, right? For business, I mean, businesses want to serve people. It's not about, we don't have Republican only businesses. We don't have Democratic only businesses. While the national media likes to continue to fund that and focus on that, that's not how real America works. It's not how real Georgia works. So there is a good opportunity for us, I believe, in the legislature and local communities to figure out a way to bridge those gaps and build a team of rivals around the next steps that we need to take to kind of cool off some of this disruption and get to that next plateau of growth and excellence again. So that's what I'm focused on. And for me, this year was the year to jump in head first. So it was fun. I'm looking forward to the next session.
Excellent. Well, that's sort of a really a prime lead in to next question. That's about you know uh, we all have a certain value system, and clearly you do as well. And when it comes to leadership, some of those values take greater priority over others. So what from your standpoint, what are when you look at your value system, what are the most important values that you bring to bear in being a leader, a member of the state house, and representing your district?
That's a great question. And I don't consider myself a leader. I feel like I'm on a leadership path for me. So I look to other leaders and I look to um, folks like my dad who set the gold standard, forgive me, for integrity. Um, Doing what's right when nobody's watching. I can hear that in my dad just over and over. And being truthful. telling people sometimes what they don't want to hear, even though they're not going to like to hear it, but they need to hear it. Raising kids has taught me that. 5 and 7-year-old, no is a very important lesson. We're in the needs versus want stage of our children, and I think there's a lot of folks in the business community and really just the greater population that have to go back to that same needs versus wants. What do we need? What do we want? And what do we prioritize? And I guess lastly for me, consistency. um, I, I am a person that believes that in order for you to serve, you have to be consistent in how you serve, in how you listen, how you're honest if you make a mistake, if you are passionate about something, that you don't give up just because you face a hurdle. Um, and for me, there's a bill. I mean, I don't mind saying it. This audit bill that I introduced as a freshman. I took my experience in accounting and finance, and having to go through the recession and went through more audits as a banker, I think, than our industry went through so many audits, not just me as one individual banker. But it taught me that, it's okay. You can get through those things, but you got to be consistent. And we got to expect consistency from others and not lowering the bar. I'm concerned most of the generations that are coming up right now, where there has become, and this is across all races. There's this victim and excuse building that's coming in. I can't make it to work because of COVID. I can't do this because of this barrier. I can't. I won't. I'm not comfortable, or I fear. Those are where people are starting, and I see it a lot with our early 20s and even some of our teenagers. And I want to champion being a victor, right? And character, and showcasing that you can go and strive for excellence and achievement and even fall short, but in that growth. And we've got to make sure that we don't lose sight of that. And I think we have to elect leaders and elect people to represent us at county commissions and at school boards and city councils. And I mean, nobody talks about it, but even homeowners associations, right? You got to have people that are willing to make tough decisions and work with each other to get through tough times. So those are the things that guide me, and I hope I can continue to hear my dad's voice.
Well, excellent. Well, you sort of mentioned one already, but with your dad. But who are your other role models and mentors and folks that you look to for guidance and leadership, guidance and service?
Sure. So this is going to sound a little strange, I guess, for some people, but I look to my wife. Um, she's an introvert. She is a research background type person. She's not type A. She is a person that absorbs all the information around her to make decisions, which has been very helpful for her in her career dealing with exceptional students, whether they're gifted or even special ed. Her focus as a principal now is in the special ed arena primarily, and building other teachers, and watching her navigate this past year, teaching our children at home during a pandemic, and keeping her 14 staff members that were reporting to her and the parents of over 200 children who have special needs children that were facing uncertainty. For her to continue to do that with grace, she became an example of leading by doing. Like there was not a, well, let's just have a planning session to figure out how are we going to deal with a student who is in a wheelchair that needs to be fed, and the parent is now hospitalized because they have COVID. You don't have time to build up a model. What do? You have to react and do. And for me, she became a example of leadership like I've never seen before. And obviously I'm biased. She's my wife. I've loved her since high school. We've been high school sweethearts, married now for 18 years, but she really, to me, shined as a leader. So that's an example that most people don't know, because she doesn't get to be out in front. she's kind of in the backdrop of so much that goes on in the school system, as well as, um, you know, when you're in certain circles, people will say, "Hey, there's a legislator." They'll come talk to me, right? But she's a more phenomenal leader than I am. And then from a, I guess, big picture leader that I look at, it's kind of a young guy. He's a generation behind me. He's a friend of mine. It's a guy named Kevin Paul Scott. Some of y'all may know him. He's got a leadership consultancy, and he's got a really good book. And I would suggest it. And he doesn't pay me for this, so this is just a friend. But if you are leading any organization, whether it's 2 people or 200, he's got a book called Essential Exchanges. And I would challenge the Forsyth County Chamber to go through that. It is a great way to just hone your own individual skills as you lead your own daily life and figure out a way to deal with tough situations. Um, and it's very practical, and it's real time, and it's taking on the utilization of technology to be able to build teams, to address concerns, but it's also a way to reflect on lots of great leaders, right? It's kind of like a little mini TED talk in a book that you don't have to pay lots and lots of money to go watch. And he's very accessible, and his team is very accessible. They work with companies like Chick-fil-A and Coca-Cola, the Atlanta Braves, but he also works with small community banks or a small insurance firm, or I think they've got a client that owns like 25 or 30 gas stations, right? And they want to be a gas station that's the cleanest small town gas station around. Now, think about that. 15 years ago, would anybody have been talking about gas stations being the cleanest stop on Georgia 400, right? But what's happened? I mean, how many of you guys will not pull over if it's not clean? Um, because of COVID, right? Or just because of you don't want your child near that. So that was a leadership that this organization, as a gas station company, decided we want to be the cleanest, safest place for people to stop. And so that's one of the things that they do. And he's a wealth of information, and he's high energy, and so he's a friend. But he also has helped challenge my thinking, especially now as a new legislator, because he's coming up with ideas on how do you deal with people, just how do you deal with people in general. And that's what we're all in, is the people business, no matter what we do. So anyway, those are the big three. And obviously, historically, Lincoln is my favorite. I've already referenced that, but he just, to me, is one of those timeless characters that every generation can learn from.
Excellent. Well, and you touching base on that book, and which I am not familiar with, so I'm glad you shared it. Reminds me, we are or I have been working on something that existed for a while that we moved away from, and that's the development of, or in the Chamber Book Club that focuses on business and leadership development. And one of the elements that we did not have in the past that I'm hoping that we will be able to have in this version of it, and you're touching on this, and maybe this would be a good place to start, is having the actual author be a part of that discussion and lead the book club conversation. So that's on my to-do list. So that fits nicely into something we're working on now. So thank you.
Put him on your list, and I think it would
Yeah.
be well worth the membership's consideration.
And just for everybody else, Kevin Paul Scott, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And
his company is called Addo, ADDO. I'll let you look up what that is in Latin.
Yeah.
And they've got a website. It's www.addo.is. We've been friends now for over 8 years, and he's just a phenomenal human being.
Excellent. Very good. Let's do this. I know we've got at least one or two more poll questions.
Sure.
So Jesse, if you don't mind, bring up our next poll question, which obviously I think some people have probably already, if they have, I guess it has not been opened yet. So if you will, go back to the polling app, and it looks like Jesse is activating it. And if you will, so the question is, for you as a business person, you as a business organization, what's the most significant issue facing your business? And the options being finding talent and employees, overcoming government regulations, access to new markets and exporting, overall market conditions, or none of those. Maybe there's other things that you're facing. So, and of course, these are all things that uh, the chamber also addresses on a regular basis too. There's no irony that those are in alignment. So we'll give folks a few minutes to address these. But while folks are doing this, you know, one of the things that I know, and I'm sure you're hearing a lot about, the Georgia Chambers out there banging the drum about, we know from particularly not just manufacturing, but across the board, but certainly manufacturers the loudest voice in it. Really what is described as by almost all of the HR professionals we're working with, and that is the workforce crisis that is being faced. And you know, business is getting busier, the economy is doing well, but the ability to execute that work is a real linchpin. So I know the legislature has talked about this in different ways in the past, and certainly school systems across the state are. And so Carl Rogers on the call here, so I know Lanier Tech as well. But kind of where do you see this heading? I mean, at first I think we all assumed that there was, and I think it is true, there a lot of it was associated with unemployment benefits being pretty rich, and there not being a lot of motivation, but also fear in some cases of getting back to work. But this is those things are now moving behind us, but the workforce crisis continues, and people still have a tremendous challenge in finding talent. So, you know, as an elected official, kind of where do you see this going? Do you see the state of Georgia having a role in addressing this, and what are your thoughts about that?
Sure. So I'll say this. I think we're still in the middle of the disruption phase, and that hits every single one of those talking points, right? Talented employees, overcoming government regulations, access to new markets and exporting, and even overall market conditions. All of those are in an area of disruption and tumult, right? I think one of the things, not because you mentioned Carl, it's just ironic. I'm glad he's here on the call. But as a former Board of Education member and a person that I believe in long term thinking and long term planning, you know, nationally, we have to consider what are some of the other large nations doing, right? You've got China, who plans in by the decade and by the half century. What can we do in an area to encourage the value of work and the value of skills? And so, what I hope to see is a continued partnership and more of a streamlined experience for students that are in pretty much that 10th grade age through the age of 20 or 21. And it be where college, career, and technical skills are more of a blended experience. And we can utilize the infrastructure that we have with the K 12, the linear techs, and even the university systems, of which students, and this has already been in motion with the Move On When Ready and with career academies, but building that timeline and that streamline to where if you're an 11th grade student who happens to be 17 years old and your dad owns a plumbing company and you want to continue in the business, but you understand that the plumbing industry is needing to adapt to new changes, what can we do to make sure that that generational business, and I've seen this as a banker, these family discussions saying, how can I pass this business to my son, be able to have a little bit of retirement, but also for him to be encouraged that this business has a going concern and that he can continue to grow and provide for his family and stay in this community. Um, Having the opportunity for college and career academies at the high school to blend those things and having it as a part of a half school, half work day will go a long way to building a culture of work being valuable again. And look, there are people out there that want to say that students are lazy and kids are lazy. I don't see that. That's not really true. Kids are kids. They're going to do what is modeled to them. And we've seen a lot of people, for whatever reason, not passing judgment on it, you know, make reasonable choices based on policy that incentivized people to not work. And I am concerned about that having a long term negative impact.
Mhm.
So, what can we at the state do? And I believe that is to equally push skills, trade, and career associated, education outcomes, along with college and university studies and research in tandem, and not value one over the other. And what I see is we kind of had a pendulum. When I was coming up in the 90s, it was college prep, right? College prep, college prep, college prep. But we also had back in those days dual certificate. We could have had a vocational degree as well as a college prep degree. I have friends that have both. I don't see why we can't go back to that, where we allow students to decide what best suits them and expose them to those opportunities of work earlier and earlier. And the data will tell you 50% of the kids across this state are at or on free and reduced lunch, whether they qualify for it or fill out the paperwork. That's just where they are. So there's already proof that these kids want to get into the workforce. They want to be a part of society. They have a necessity to it because they don't have, a wealthy family structure, right? And so they need to be able to have those skills. And we've got to champion that and give, I think, equal impetus to both. And I hope that we can have school systems like Dawson and Lumpkin and Forsyth in other parts of the state jump at the opportunity to have more partnerships and dual enrollment, and not fight over which entity's getting the dollar. I think the state's got to do a better job of selling that to the leaders at the technical schools and the leaders at the superintendencies of public schools, but figure out a way to make sure that we allow that student that happens to be a 10th grader who knows what they want to do, give them that path and let them run, but then also for the student that doesn't know, make them exposed to all of it, and allow that child to be, cultivated, if you will, and make sure parents are involved in that as well, and grandparents, and those folks that are taking care of those kids. We've got to make sure that we don't stifle that opportunity for partnership and innovation.
Excellent. Well, and as an aside, and I know this is something that not necessarily the Georgia Chamber, but I know there's chambers all over the state that have been on board with this. I hope this year the legislature will take up the earned income tax credit for those making I know the number has changed over time, but it actually counteracts the incentive of not working to make that there be a financial tax credit to be able to be a financial incentive to work. But and we're hearing that more and more from, particularly again, manufacturing companies. I hear that would potentially could help. So,
And I think that Shaw Blackman is a chairman of the committee that's going to be able to look at that first, Ways and Means. And so he and I've had conversations. I'll quickly tell you a funny story just because it got me in trouble. I dropped a depreciation bill. Smart idea, bipartisan actually, and it would have basically matched the federal fast forward depreciation at the state level that the Trump administration had put in. It was going to set to expire 2025. And my idea was, let's go ahead and put that in for 2021 and run it for 4 years. Well, I was so new, so excited to try to make a difference, saw the impact it would do for, the business community and, to keep people at work, incentivize people to hire. But it also had a cost of about $600 million to the state budget. And you don't drop a bill without talking to the chairman first. Lesson learned. So it was, hopefully that bill will come back next year and we can possibly get that added for at least the next 3 budget cycles. So anyway, but it's not easy to address those type tax policies, but they will help, like you said.
Very good. So I know we are coming down to the last 9 minutes of our call today. So I just want to remind everybody, if you have a question or something you want to share or add, if you will use either the chat feature, if you do not are not interested, not want to be live, or if under the reaction button, if you will use the raise hand feature, we can unmute you and bring you into the call. So I've got a couple of more questions. So if you all have things that you all would like to cover before we end, if you'll post those, and we'll cover those as we close up. So really, my sort of last question for you, or I guess it's a group of questions, but in thinking about the next 12 to 24 months for you as a legislator, what are your priorities? Whether that's legislatively or just from a personal leadership standpoint, but what are your priorities looking ahead?
So I would say three things really quick. One, I'm blessed. I'm going to have an opportunity to be a part of the legislative leadership training at University of Georgia in early August. So that's going to be pretty intensive, short period educational opportunity for me to be exposed to some good leadership, practical applications and ideas. Number two, I am, some folks know this and some folks don't, but I took this summer off and stepped out of my banking career for about 90 days. But presses are not released yet, but I'm getting back into banking, and we'll be back in the region soon. And so from a personal standpoint, I found a great employer that's going to work with me on my kind of multi-hat career and legislator. So I'm excited about that. And I think in my role as a legislator, I'm really going to focus in and learn as much as I can during this reapportionment process that's coming up. As the speaker said, when the frost is on the pumpkins. We don't know if it's October, November, but I'm really going to listen and learn about this process. As a freshman, we won't really be in the decision recommending stage. We'll be more of what we call in our house, you get what you get, don't pitch a fit stage. But I'm going to listen and learn, and I'm excited to be a part of a reapportionment as a freshman. Not everybody gets to do that. Obviously, it only comes around every 10 years. So I'm looking forward to learning and seeing what happens, because that's going to shape the political scene for the next decade.
Well, and so we've had a couple of questions posted. One, Carl, thank you. And I think you probably addressed this in what you just said, but the special session coming up soon, how will your district change, or do you know yet? And I think you addressed that, but do you have any indication of how you think that's going to go?
I have my guesses, but it's all speculative. And the big picture thing is the population of the last decade has been more centralized northern. I mean, so it's north of I-20. What is that going to do to District 9? I don't know. It really depends on, I think, the congressional map more than the individual state map in our area. But I expect that it will not be the same. I will have different precincts. I'm hopeful I can continue to serve all three counties. I just don't know. I have no idea.
Great. I think Carl has some advice to give as a former legislator on there as well. And so Carter Patterson has posted a completely non-controversial question about locating the airport at Dawson County. I think everybody's on board. I don't think there's any controversy about that.
Nobody has a problem with that.
But I will say, and Carter has brought this up many times in the past, from a business standpoint, North Georgia and specific, anywhere north of Atlanta, there's certainly some opportunity for somewhere us to have, even if it's a private airport, but and in fact now, by the way, we have been, and I'm sure Dawson County has as well. We're getting increasing requests and interest from helicopter companies, Honeywell's out there with a drone shuttle, but airport shuttle service. So, kind of, where do you see that going long term? I mean, where do you see that?
Well, I'm 43, and I can remember fairly far back. I remember having this conversation with our social studies teacher as an eighth grader. What's going to happen with the Atlanta property and the old Lockheed Martin? And is it going to be an airport? I don't. I don't know. I'm open to us looking at that. I'm not really putting that as my priority. Um, for me, I believe that, from an economic standpoint, it's on the table. We have to talk about it, but I also think that there's opportunity for there being a bigger recreation destination. Utilize what we have in our back door. I was watching early this morning the news about the number of people visiting national parks and state parks has skyrocketed. And to me, I think from a regional perspective, if we could expand places like Amiclola Falls, if we could expand an additional destination park for, whatever that could end up being with that tract of land, and also pulling in reservoir and water, because that's another long-term need. Those are a little higher on the priority list for me personally than an airport per se, but you can't take it off the list because it's been on the list as a possibility for so long. But I'm still new enough to know that I don't know, so I'm not going to opine on something that I'm not versed in. But I'm open to really listening and watching to see what happens. So
Very good. All right. Well, I think we've come down to the end of it. I just want to give you a chance if you have any closing remarks or anything. But also, I just want to say, on behalf of the chamber, and certainly as mentioned, I've certainly known you a long time, and appreciate all the incredible contributions you have made to not just Dawson County but our region, and very glad you're continuing that in the state house, but also your contributions as a business person. I mean, there's your fingerprints as a banker over some of the great developments in our community are all over the place, and we appreciate that as well. So with that, thank you, and I'll certainly let you close this out. And
I'll just tell the folks that are on the call, thank you for being on here. If you've got any individual questions, I'll make sure that my email address is provided to James and it can be disseminated. And I also want to say congratulations to Forsyth County on being considered one of the top chambers in the nation. That's nothing to laugh at. That does not happen by accident. That's a on purpose planned opportunity. And I heard you didn't get the top notch, but maybe next time. And well done. And at least we didn't lose to some Yanks up north, right?
Yes,
So
that's exactly right. For those on the call that did not know, so we were in the top four chambers in the country for Chamber of the Year, and we found out last week that actually it was a chamber in West Alabama chamber, Tuscaloosa. But I will tell you, we know those folks and have a lot of respect for them. And if we were not going to win, I was glad it was. I told Will earlier, glad it wasn't them, because if we had lost to the chamber of Massachusetts, I would have been ticked. So,
me too.
But actually, the folks in Tuscaloosa are very deserving of it and have worked really hard. But anyway, so thank you, Will, for saying that, and thank you all for joining us on the call. And yes, we will share your email address with everybody. And thank you all for joining us. Great conversation, Will. Thank you. And as always, you tell us how we can help you be successful, and we will do it.
Keep telling me what you're hearing on the ground. What business needs, and I'm always going to listen.
Thank you.
Thanks.